mentioned we had a overnight resignation, and we were both so concerned about leaving these women without the services. It's not the first time I've worked out there. 15 years ago when I took the job at the Women's Center, Pamela said, could you go out there, you know, maybe a day a week, and we're only out there an afternoon. She said, I think we need more services, but check it out. And I ended up being there for a year because I liked it very much. And finally Pamela said, you gotta come back. You know, we'll expand, we'll do what you think and get out there more, but I need you back at the ranch.
How often do we have services there? Is it 4 days a week now?
We have 5 days a week.
5 days.
Yeah. And so we started off with just an afternoon of services, then went to 1.5 days, and now we are 5 days a week, which is terrific. I always tell the counselors who are going to work out there, expect the unexpected. Sometimes you can't even get on the grounds. They reroute you. You can't go into the facility for a lot of reasons if there's a lockdown. We had a couple of our advocates a few weeks ago. The canine dogs were in the parking lot, and so no one was allowed except for essential personnel. So it's an interesting environment to work in. It can be unnerving. It certainly can be anxiety producing, and you never really know what you're going to face that day. So you've got to be very flexible and learn to work. We're subcontractors, so we don't work for the Bristol County House of Correction, and so we have to follow their rules. And then you have, when you go out there, to get out there, you've got to be approved by the Sheriff's Department, which means that you have a federal quarry. They confirm your education level. You've got to go to an orientation, which tells you how to behave, what to do if you're a hostage, in a hostage situation. And it takes a couple of weeks to get that done, so it's not like you just walk in. A few general remarks about the women's facility, which is, as you know, right down the street from us as we speak. It is very well run. That's my impression. It's very orderly. When I was out there for the 6 months from last summer, there's a minimum of violent incidents, and I was very impressed with how well organized it is. The major and lieutenant, who are the management team, are both women of color, which I think is terrific, and they just present extremely strong leadership. They're highly visible all the time. It's a very small facility. The cells are on the 2nd floor, and you've got an open room, which is the chow hall, and you've got a kitchen and a laundry, and there's one classroom, and if you're doing counseling, you're in a room that has 2 chairs. That's it. So you're sitting like a foot away from the women. So you've got to work around that because it gets very noisy. You can't close the door to the counseling room for safety reasons, and the COs make rounds making sure that the visitors, like myself and my colleagues, are okay. As I said, it's small. The census when I was out there ran between 73 to maybe 78. In the winter, that's about average. In the summer, it gets very overcrowded. One thing I noticed is that the programs actually take place out there, and that's pretty unusual for a correctional facility. Most of the time it's on paper, and things either don't run or they're frequently canceled. And I think it's to the credit of the major and the lieutenant that they keep those programs, those important programs running for the women. I don't remember anything when I was out there being canceled. What's out there for, if a woman wants to really get serious about turning her life around, this is what they offer. AdCare Hospital and Outpatient is there 4 days a week, morning and afternoon, for substance abuse treatment. The GED and education programs run 5 days a week. And again, not canceled. Parenting classes are 3 times a week, and we're out there, as I just mentioned, 5 days a week. And that there are also AA and NA meetings that take place, because you've got incredibly high rate of substance abuse, people with that history. UMass offers history classes and literature classes, which are very popular in the evening. Not for credit, but so people are busy if they want to be. And of course, there's a wide variety of religious and spiritual programs, Bible studies, Catholic Mass, and many different Protestant groups are there on a weekly basis, but there's something every day and in the evening too. So if you're motivated, and you can really take advantage, and I don't think that's the case in every jail or prison, but I do think it's due to the very strong leadership out there. In the 6 months I was there, I was looking at my notes, I worked with 40 plus women. Now, some women I saw once only at the request of the major for an assessment. Some I saw twice a week. The first day I walked in, the major said to me, look, one of our women just got terrible news a few hours ago. Her father of her child and boyfriend and also the abuser had overdosed, and she had been contacted by a relative, so she was quite upset. So I worked with her. So it's a variety of reasons you're going to see someone. Generally, there are I kind of divided them into 4 categories in terms of, mental health issues. You have your developmentally population, cognitively limited, who are often bullied and re-victimized out there. They really have a hard time standing up for themselves. Their reading and writing skills are not so great. So that's one population. Then you have your dual diagnosis or co-occurring disorder group. Women who have histories of both substance abuse and mental health issues, the most profound being post-traumatic stress disorder, another population. Then you've got your serious and persistent chronically mentally ill. For the life of me, I don't know why they're there. They should be in hospitals, that's my opinion. That's a small population, but it's quite obvious. And then you've got your sociopathic personality disorder, I think, what we think of as criminals. A couple of commonalities occurred to me when I was out there. Of the 40 plus women I worked with, when a serious crime was committed, these women did not act alone. Only 2 women I spoke with, and I didn't see everybody obviously, were with a boyfriend. It was gang-related or some kind of relationship, but they weren't alone when they did this. They were driving the cars, that kind of thing. But that caught my attention, that they had a guy with them when these things happened. 90% of the women I saw had children, multiple children, most of them. All my clients had complex trauma histories, early childhood, adolescent trauma, and certainly in adulthood, domestic violence and sexual assault. And I would say all these women presented in the therapy sessions I have with them with serious issues of grief and loss, without question. So this is my experience out there. And I'm going to shift to the mothers because that's why we're here tonight. I've often thought that you'd be a lousy father in this society. Oh, he's a jerk, he's a bum. Kind of, they get off the hook a lot of the time. Typical, a loser. But you be a bad mother, shame on you. There's nothing worse in this society than being thought of as a bad mother. And I'm really convinced about that. The guys are missing in action with incarcerated fathers, but these mothers really take it on the nose in terms of how horrible they really feel about being in jail. There's a wide range, of course, of situations mothers face in jail. And I kind of divided it up. You've got mothers whose children are living in the foster care system, or they might be in residential if they're adolescents. And then you've got the moms whose children are living with family members, and I think it's tougher for them because a lot of these families have had it. These women have been running, some of them running the streets for years, in and out of jail, like Pamela was saying, circling the drain, back again. I was only out there for 6 months, and I shouldn't say shocked, but someone would be released, and 2 weeks later, they're back. And that was not uncommon. So you've got families sisters raising the woman's children, maybe the grandmother is doing that, and they're up to here with it. They don't want anything to do with these women, and they don't want these kids to have anything to do. They don't get letters, the families won't visit, so they're really cut off. The women whose children are in foster care actually fare a little better because you've got a DCF worker who has to take the child out. But visiting is a very interesting issue for the women. First of all, there are no contact visits whatsoever out at either in the men's facility or in the women's facility, except for attorneys. So you're visiting with a family member or a child behind a glass with a phone. And a lot of my clients out there said, I don't want my kid to see me behind glass. It's not, some of them were okay with it, but a great many of them did not want to see their children. And it's very interesting because at the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Facility, which is known as our Supermax in Massachusetts, it's up in Shirley, Mass, has an actual parent, it's a men's prison. It has an actual parent visiting program. They have a special area for children, murals on the wall. All the furniture is like for little kids, and there's a parent educator on duty. And that's the only one that I'm aware of in Massachusetts. And that is, a lot of lifers up there, but it's for men. I don't know. Okay, so many of these families just will cut off that communication. I had women tell me, all I want is those school pictures, just a couple of pictures. Or many of them would get letters, written, return to sender, just no contact at all. And listening to the women I worked with, there seems to be such a correlation between the age of the children and being rejected by children. Teens and young adults, according to the women that I worked with, tend to be highly rejecting, and for some reason, sons more than daughters. They don't want to go out there. They don't want to write a letter, but the sons somehow had a tougher time. I'm not sure what that's about. I'm sure there's some research someplace that I could find it. But because of, then another interesting phenomenon caught my attention. Because there's so much shame and guilt that these mothers face, when they are faced with the termination of parental rights, which takes forever in Massachusetts, you get 20 chances to reunify with your children. I'm not sure how I feel about that many chances, but that's what it feels like. But the women that I worked with who go into what I call battle mode with DCF, all of a sudden they want these kids more than anything. And they may not have been very good mothers. And what happens is, I have found that it's really, they put all their energy into feuding, if you would, with the department. And they neglect themselves. They're not in these programs that they could take advantage of. That's all they talk about. It's all they want to talk about. And they can't let go, because if you give your kids up, that's tough, but it makes you feel even worse and more guilt-ridden. And a lot of these women, that's where the grief and loss comes in, because many of them, while they're there, have those parental rights terminated. but I was so taken by these feuds that they get into, to the neglect of, trying to get their life together out there, trying to do the right thing. I'm not a bleeding heart anymore. I've been a social worker for a long time. I'm sure I haven't seen everything. There's still more to come. But Thursday afternoons out at the jail always caught my attention when I was out there. It's the OBGYN clinic, and there's a long wooden bench outside the medical office where the women who are pregnant wait to be seen. And I couldn't help but think of nice doctor's office with baby magazines, parent magazines. A lot of chatter among pregnant women, boyfriends there to support, husbands, family members, but they're sitting there. And I've never seen a more depressed looking group of people, because they know what's coming. Most likely that the infant, if they deliver while they're in jail, and that would be at St. Luke's in New Bedford, that child, they'll have 48 hours and then the child will be put into foster care or with relatives. But I really, that cannot possibly not tug at your heartstrings when you see that. And they all sit there and nobody's talking, and it's just pretty sad. So model programs. There are only 8 states in the country that have what's called prison nurseries, and that's it. It's fairly new, probably in the last 10 years, and it's quite interesting that the infant goes home with the incarcerated mother. There's a lot of research both ways, whether this is really great or it isn't. But I was watching a video the other day at the women's prison out in Indiana, and there's a whole, the rooms are nice, you would never know they're cells. They're decorated beautifully. The COs are not quite as in garb that makes, would scare a kid. So that's on the horizon, but we don't have anything like that in Massachusetts, anything close to it. And as far as I know, the only parent visiting program is up at Susa Baranowski. Can that happen at Bristol? It's a very small facility. It would take a lot of money, and certainly, the facility itself isn't set up for that. Now, who's an attorney in the audience, or a student? Okay, so, all right, so this is what I want to pass on. I got constant concerns expressed and constant complaints. They never see their attorney. They don't know when they're going to jail, going to court, no communicate, and I heard it so often, I have to think it's accurate. So, sometimes women would tell me they thought they were going on a certain date. The date would come and go. And there's a lot of acting out there when that happens. Not a letter, not a visit, and I think that's really tough. So if you are going to work with this population, please keep that in mind, that they deserve communication. They can't pick up the phone and call you. They can't make an appointment to come to your office and find out what's going on with their case. So I'm passing that on in this environment that I think that could certainly be improved. So I'm going to leave you with this. As Pamela mentioned, we have beds in our program, and we get referrals all week long from the House of Correction, from women wanting to come to our program because they've heard about it. They've had friends out there, and they know it's a solid program. And Mally asked me to bring someone along, but I think it was a bit too much for some of the women who are only out of jail 3 months, 4 months. But I said to them, would you be willing to write a letter and talk about what it was like to be a mom, a mother, while you're incarcerated? So they did. I've got 2, but I'm going to only read one. So she says, hello, and to all of you. I told her where Pamela and I would be going tonight. My name is Jen, and I was recently incarcerated at Dartmouth House of Correction. I have 3 children, ages 11, 18, and 24. Prior to my incarceration, none of them were speaking to me. due to a long history of addiction, running the streets, and disappearing on them. I would like to talk about things I feel would have helped both me and my children during this time. Because my kids are considered adults and older children, there were no services. The parenting classes were for moms of young children. So as far as a healthy reunification with me, I did not know how to behave. I needed to learn how to be a mom to my older ones. I had no understanding of how to restart those relationships, or how to set boundaries, how to explain my past, and how to communicate with them. My son needed an outlet, I believe, through the system to begin to deal with the past and moving on while I was still in jail. I have never felt so lonely in my life. And I often hear my daughter's voice in my head because at my last arrest, she was in the apartment. It was a drug kind of raid. And she said, I will never, she told me, I will never forget her screaming, Mom, 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 when the dogs are in the apartment and the police and all the commotion going on. Okay. Let's skip down here. Even when I was in jail, and even though they were older children, my kids did not have the finances for me to be able to call, because you have to put money on an inmate's phone, and speak to them, nor rides to come and see me. My sisters and brothers were angry and really encouraged my children not to be in touch with me. I didn't know what to say when I went about writing letters which were often returned. Should I go into detail about my addiction? Should I tell them about my sexual and physical abuse? Where do I set boundaries? How can I reach out to them in a healthy way? I think the most powerful tool that could have changed all of us is it's a little tough to read, is how could I handle things better when I leave? So what does she end by saying here again? It would have been great to have a counselor present during visits so we could work things out. Beginning the process while I was there would have prepared me much better and relieved my anxiety as far as my children are concerned. I asked my 18-year-old what he wanted and needed from me. He said, I just want a mom. I just want my mom. No matter what the age, I still need to learn to be a better mom to my children. Thanks for taking the time to listen, Jen. So I thought that was good.